Hey guys, Super Godzilla Final Wars here, and today I am back once again with another video. Today we're going to be going over what if Godzilla -1 was in the monsterverse. Now, in my previous video, we already went over on what if the 1954 Godzilla was in the monsterverse. And I would say, out of all the switching Godzilla universe thing, whatever it is you want to call it, I would say that one, besides the Heisei one, is possibly the most interesting one I've done so far. And don't worry, we'll do a continuation once when Godzilla X Kong Supernova comes out. We'll do a continuation, and yeah. But for now, since that movie's not out yet, we're still on a to be continued. So, yeah. Anyways, so what if Godzilla -1 was in the monsterverse? Will he turn out to be a hero, or will he be a villain? Now keep in mind, we're not going to be going over what if Godzilla from the monsterverse was in the -1 universe, considering we don't know if the -1 universe will continue beyond the sequel. If it does, then we'll put monsterverse Godzilla in the -1 universe. But for now, it is not likely to happen. So, anyways. So, what would happen if Godzilla -1 was in the monsterverse? Well, let's start from the very beginning. Let's say that Godzilla, just like in his own movie, was just a simple radioactive dinosaur, and he was just simply minding his own business, until the nuclear bomb of 1946 happened, mutating Godzilla, becoming what he is now, Godzilla. And let's say during 1947, let's say that Godzilla attacks Japan, just like in its own timeline. Now, what about Shiromiro? We do know that Shiromiro was kind of acting up in the monsterverse during somewhere in the 1940s in the monsterverse timeline. So, would Godzilla care about Shiromiro, or would he just simply ignore him? Well, I would say at first Godzilla would probably ignore him. But once when Shiromiro makes his way towards Godzilla, I think that's when Godzilla would actually start to care and fight Shiromiro. Now, keep in mind, we don't know how good Godzilla is at hand-to-hand combat. We don't know if he's really good at it or he's not good at it at all. So we really don't know if he's rather good at hand-to-hand combat or not. So let's just say, for the sake of this scenario, the battle turns out to be a tie. Now, sorry about that. Anyways, now, what would happen beyond 1947? Would Godzilla possibly going after Shiromiro? Probably. That just depends. If they're going at the same location, then I'm pretty sure the two would probably fight. But I wouldn't see Goji actually going after Shiromiro unless he actually knew that he was a threat. If he knew that that Shiromiro was a threat, I'm pretty sure Godzilla would probably go after him. But let's say that Goji does go after Shiromiro because Goji sensed that Shiromiro was a threat. And let's say after the nuclear bomb test in 1954, Godzilla simply just disappears for a while, and it's presumed that he died. Now, unlike the other scenarios where the human characters get some signs that Godzilla is still alive, like in the Heisei version and the 1954 version, they kind of saw rather Godzilla is alive, or they saw that Godzilla was alive. Here, I don't think so. If anything, I think Godzilla was probably searching for a new territory. Now, this is where the interesting part comes in. This is where we bring in Kong Skull Island. Now, Kong in this timeline is, I think, 30 meters, which at this point he's nowhere matched for Godzilla, who is 50 meters. So, Kong would still have the agility, but Godzilla, he will just have everything up in his sleeves. Now, when Godzilla arrives, let's say this takes place during the events of Kong Skull Island, Godzilla arrives and starts to see that Skull Island is possibly a worthy territory. Kong will eventually sense the new threat, and once when he meets Godzilla, he's kind of shocked because Godzilla is like 2 meters taller than he is. And so Kong would probably have to switch to a different strategy. Kong would normally rush in and fight his opponents, let's say like Skullcrawlers. He's been handling Skullcrawlers pretty well because they were very tiny. But here, he's facing up against an opponent that's far bigger than he is. And let's say that when Godzilla arrived on Skull Island, he also destroyed the ships, meaning that the main cast in Skull Island are officially trapped on Skull Island. Now, Godzilla and Kong will most likely begin their fight, with Kong at first getting the sort of advantage by having his speed and agility on his side, but of course eventually that all comes crumbling down when Godzilla ultimately defeats him. Godzilla becomes the newly crowned king of Skull Island. And let's say that the battle even awoken the big Skullcrawler. Would the big Skullcrawler pose a threat to Godzilla? Probably not. Considering that the big Skullcrawler was nowhere near comparison to the gigantic Skullcrawler that appeared in Godzilla vs. Kong. So, the Skullcrawler in this movie is not that much of a threat to Godzilla. But would Godzilla eliminate it? That depends. If the Skullcrawler is minding his own business, then I'm pretty sure Godzilla would not really care. But if the Skullcrawler is trying to take Godzilla down, then Godzilla will only attack back in self-defense. And he'll probably most likely kill the Skullcrawler, meaning that Godzilla did Kong a favor at the very least. Now, what about the events of the animated Skull Island series? For the animated Skull Island series, this is where things are going to get very, very interesting. Since Godzilla is now the newly crowned king of Skull Island, all the other kaiju on that island have already submitted to Godzilla as the new alpha. And we can even say that the natives on the island even worship Godzilla now. Kong is no longer considered as the god that once protected them. Now, here's the question. Would Godzilla kill the natives on Skull Island? The answer is no. And here's why. In the novelization, it's stated that Godzilla has a symbiotic relationship with the people of Odo Island. But yeah, it is stated that in the novelization of -1 that Godzilla has a symbiotic relationship with the people of Odo Island. He would sometimes bring them food, and yeah. So would the same thing happen here? Probably. It would probably happen. Because Godzilla has shown in his own movie, and it's stated that in the novelization that Godzilla is also kind of intelligent. because he knew that Shikishima was in the plane and spared his life because Shikishima was not a threat to him. And so, he spared his life. The same thing goes to that other mechanic. Godzilla knew that those two humans were not a threat, and so he spared their lives. Now what about Kong? Would he still hang out with his little lady friend? That depends. That depends if Godzilla is nowhere near the area. At this point, we can kind of say that Kong is now sort of the co-ruler of Skull Island now. Skull Island has two rulers. There's Godzilla and there's Kong. Godzilla is the main ruler, while Kong is only sort of second in command of the island. I wouldn't say the two would get along, but we can kind of say that the two would have some form of a neutral respect towards each other, where Godzilla respects Kong and Kong respects Godzilla. This does not mean the two are friends or allies. They just have a neutral respect towards each other. They would often fight for territory and for food. Now, what about the Kraken? Will the Kraken pose a threat to Godzilla? Yeah, I would say it's a possibility. It's definitely a possibility. And I'm pretty sure, just like in the original timeline, that human characters would try to find a way to get off Skull Island, but here's the twist. They did not know that Godzilla was on the island, because they were never informed that Godzilla was on the island. But when they hear his roar and see him, that's when they're like, oh shit, Godzilla's here. Okay, yeah, we definitely need to get the hell out of here. Now, in the series, our main heroes decided to have Kong to fight the Kraken. Would they use Kong again? Well, I would say most likely not, because this is where -1 changes the events of Skull Island in the animated series very differently. Because let's say that one time he was by the area where the village was at, and he briefly had a fight with the Kraken, and he was managed to drive the Kraken off. The Kraken was forced to go to a different part of Skull Island. And thus, the Kraken no longer hangs around in that particular spot where Kong's friend and her village was at. So in this timeline, Kong's friend is still alive. So most likely they will have no reason to get Kong to fight the Kraken, but they would probably try to get Godzilla to fight the Kraken. And how will they do that exactly? Because, like I said before, Godzilla did not attack Shikishima and the other mechanic because they were not a threat. And, well, would Godzilla attack our survivors? Probably not, unless they show that they are indeed a threat to him. If they do that, then most likely he would chase them. If they do end up getting Godzilla to chase them, then he would fight the Kraken.